I became homeless the same week my divorce papers were signed. My ex-wife and her army of high-priced lawyers did not just take everything from me. They made sure there was nothing left to take. So there I was, elbow deep in a dumpster behind an abandoned mansion trying to find a broken chair leg I could fix and sell for $20. That was when I felt someone standing behind me. A woman. Clean shoes, expensive suit, the kind of person who would never breathe the same air as someone like me anymore. "Excuse me, are you Corbin Hales?" I nodded, embarrassed hands covered in grime. She smiled, calm, almost relieved. "Your great-uncle just passed away." I froze, and he left me $58 million. My pulse stopped. My world stopped. Then she added, "But there is one condition." And what she said next changed everything. I love seeing how far my story can reach. Sometimes knowing someone is listening makes all the difference. Thank you. And now, let me tell you everything. And if my story means something to you, please consider subscribing. It helps more than you know. My name is Corbin Hales, and this is how my life fell apart and why I had to rebuild it from the ground up. I became homeless the same week my divorce was finalized. But the real beginning of this story is the moment I found myself bent over a dumpster behind an abandoned mansion in Silvercrest Bluffs, Utah. My hands buried in cold trash as if I were digging through my own grave. The stench was sharp and sour, the kind that clings to your clothes long after you walk away, and every clang of metal against metal echoed like a reminder of everything I had lost. Wind cut through my jacket. Dust stung my eyes, and humiliation settled on my shoulders with a weight I could not shake. I used to be a promising young architect with a career people said could go far. But the divorce had taken that version of me and shredded it piece by piece. Sienna Marlowe and her family's lawyers did not just outmaneuver me. They crushed me until I had nothing left to stand on. These days I lived in my beat-up Ford Ranger parked behind a Walmart lot, the back seat serving as my bed, the dashboard lit by the glow of fast food signs at night. I showered at a 24-hour gym if I had a guest pass left 8, expired bread from clearance racks, and made whatever money I could by fixing discarded furniture I found in dumpsters like this one. Marketplace buyers did not care where the pieces came from, as long as they looked good, and I needed every dollar to make it through another week. The only things I kept from my old life were the 26 sketchbooks I had filled in secret throughout 10 years of marriage, designs I never got to build, buildings I imagined in the dark when Sienna slept beside me, unaware that the husband she belittled every day was still clinging desperately to something that felt like a calling. I could still hear her voice in the courtroom, cool and polished, as she said, "You are nothing, Corbin. No one wants a failure like you." It was not the first time she had said something like that. A decade of manipulation had stripped me down until even signing the divorce papers felt like handing over the last of my dignity. House gone, savings gone, career gone, reputation gone. I tightened my grip around a broken chair leg I had just pulled from the dumpster. My fingers numb, the shame almost physical. Then I sensed someone behind me. I turned startled as a woman in a charcoal gray suit stepped toward me, heels on concrete, sounding foreign in a place like this. She did not belong anywhere near a trash-filled alley. She held a leather folder, her posture steady, her gaze fixed on me in a way that made me straighten up despite myself. "Excuse me," she said, her voice calm but deliberate. "Are you Corbin Hales?" I froze. For a moment, I could barely form a sound. Why would someone like her be here for someone like me? I nodded slowly, embarrassment heating my face as I wiped my hands on my jeans. She offered a small, almost sympathetic smile. "My name is Maribel Knox. I am an attorney from Hawthorne City, Colorado." She opened her folder and continued with a sentence that split my world open. "Your great-uncle Thaddeus Rowan has passed away, and you are the sole heir to his $58 million estate." The words did not register at first. They just hung in the air while my brain tried to compute them. 58 million estate heir. None of it matched the reality of who I was in that moment or where I was standing. I felt my knees weaken, not from excitement but from disbelief. Maribel showed me photos of the mansion legal documents, the will with my full name printed in bold letters. It was real. All of it was real. But before hope could fully bloom, she added quietly, "There is one condition." I held my breath. My future suddenly depended on the next words out of her mouth. "If you accept this," she said, closing her folder, "you will never be the same man standing in front of me again." And just like that, the life I thought was over shifted beneath my feet. Maribel led me to a black SUV parked at the curb, its polished surface reflecting the ruins of the neighborhood around us. I slid into the passenger seat, self-conscious about the dirt on my clothes, but she did not flinch. Instead, she opened a sealed envelope and placed the will in my hands. The condition was written in Thaddeus' unmistakable handwriting. To receive the full inheritance, I had to take over as CEO of Rowan Atelier in Hawthorne City for at least 1 year. If I quit, failed, resigned, or proved incapable of leading every dollar along with the estate in the Crescent Vale district, would be transferred to the American Institute of Architects. It felt impossible. I had not worked in years. I was living out of my truck. I had no business stepping into a leadership role at one of the most renowned architectural firms in the country. But the ink on the document was real, and so was the name on it. Thaddeus Rowan, my great-uncle. The man who once told me I had a gift worth fighting for. The last real conversation we had flashed through my mind 10 years ago, the day I told him I was marrying Sienna Marlowe instead of moving to Hawthorne City to join his firm. He told me I was throwing away everything I had built, everything he had prepared for me. I told him he did not understand that Sienna was my future, my life. We argued for hours, both too stubborn to stop. When I hung up the phone, I blocked his number. I never called again. As the SUV rolled onto the highway, Maribel looked over at me and said something that struck deeper than I wanted to admit. "He never removed you from his will, Corbin. Not once." My throat tightened. I stared down at the papers, at the signature that once belonged to a man who loved me even when I did not deserve it. Then came the next blow. "Thaddeus built a studio for you inside the Crescent Vale district mansion," she said. 7 years ago, fully equipped. He designed it just for you." I turned to her stunned. She was not lying. The details in her voice felt too precise. The idea that he had been waiting for me, preparing a place for me even after I had abandoned him, cut deeper than any insult Sienna had ever thrown my way. Maribel was not finished. "Rowan Atelier is struggling internally. Thaddeus believed only you could restore it. The condition was not about money. It was about saving what he spent a lifetime building." The weight of responsibility hit me harder than the promise of wealth. I was not just inheriting an estate. I was inheriting a failing legacy and a decade's worth of regret. The flight to Hawthorne City was the first time in months I had sat somewhere soft that was not a car seat. I changed into a clean shirt Maribel had bought for me, feeling like an imposter every time the flight attendant smiled politely. The fear that I did not belong in the life waiting for me gnawed at me relentlessly. When we finally drove through the Crescent Vale district, I felt as if I had been transported into another universe. Towering oaks, pristine sidewalks, homes that looked like modern sculptures. Then the SUV stopped in front of a 6-story mansion of stone and glass, the kind of place you only see in magazines. The front door opened before I reached it. A woman with silver hair and sharp, kind eyes stood waiting. "Mr. Hales," she said softly. "I am Odette Lorne. I took care of your great-uncle for almost 3 decades." She looked at me, really looked, and her voice cracked just slightly as she said, "Welcome home." The words hit me so hard I could not speak. Something in my chest shifted, pain guilt, and something that felt dangerously like hope. And I knew, without her saying it, that more secrets waited for me behind those doors. The moment I stepped inside the Crescent Vale District mansion, something in my chest pulled tight. The place did not just echo wealth. It carried intention. Warm oak stretched across the floors, the kind that glowed under natural light pouring through windows framed in stone. Marble columns rose from each corner like quiet sentinels. Every room I walked past blended classical structure with modern restraint. The exact balance Thaddeus always said defined timeless architecture. Seeing it all made my stomach twist with memories I had refused to think about for years. I kept moving, pretending I was not overwhelmed by nostalgia, regret, and disbelief crashing together inside me. Odette walked beside me with a calm familiarity, as though she had been waiting for this moment as long as Thaddeus had. She told me stories I barely remembered me at 10 years old, following Thaddeus around construction sites, asking questions he happily answered. Me, sitting in his office with tracing paper and pencils, trying to copy the angles he drew so effortlessly. She spoke about how proud he used to be, how he would show my college sketches to guests who visited the mansion. Hearing it now felt like someone peeling back a layer of skin I thought had hardened long ago. I had spent years convincing myself Thaddeus had given up on me, but Odette made it painfully clear that he never had. He watched my life unravel from a distance, and whether out of respect or heartbreak, he never interfered. Then she led me up a hidden stairway tucked behind a walnut-paneled wall. The 6th floor felt separate from the rest of the house, almost untouched. When she unlocked the door and pushed it open, I felt the air shift. The studio was vast sunlight cascading through skylights onto drafting tables that looked barely used. Computers and design monitors sat arranged with surgical precision. Shelves reached toward the ceiling filled with architectural journals, material-scale models, and books I remembered Thaddeus referencing when I was still in school. The space was so perfectly curated for me that it stung. On the far wall hung my thesis project, the sustainable community center design I had poured my entire senior year into. I had not seen that drawing in over a decade yet. Here it was framed like something worth preserving. My throat tightened. Thaddeus had not built a studio for a future apprentice. He had built one for me. A life I never stepped into. A life he kept ready in case I ever came to my senses. Odette placed a small wooden box into my hands. "He told me to give this to you when the time was right," she said. My fingers trembled as I opened it. Inside were photos of me at 21, the age I was before everything shifted. There were sketches I had forgotten, drawing lines I recognized as my own, but from another lifetime. Underneath was a stack of letters, all addressed to me, all sealed. Odette said he never sent them because he did not want to pressure me. He hoped I would return when I was ready. I opened the first letter, the one resting on top. Thaddeus' handwriting hit me like a blow. If you are reading this, it means you are finally ready to face yourself. That single sentence shattered every defensive narrative I had built. I was not abandoned. I was the one who left. I was the one who cut the line. Realizing that tore something open inside me, but in the space it created something else. Rose determination, gratitude, a need to make things right. Odette rested a hand on my shoulder and told me the board of Rowan Atelier had scheduled an emergency meeting for the next morning. They intended to challenge my position. I had barely set foot in the mansion, and a fight was already waiting for me. As the sun dipped beneath the Hawthorne city skyline, I stood alone in the studio Thaddeus built for me and whispered to myself, I have never feared a room as much as I fear the one I will walk into tomorrow. I stood outside the glass doors of the Rowan Atelier boardroom the next morning, my palms damp despite the cold air conditioning. Every instinct in me wanted to turn around, go back to the studio, or maybe back to Silvercrest Bluffs, where at least the humiliation had been familiar. But that was not an option anymore. I was not here to claim a fortune. I was here to repay a debt to the man who believed in me, even when I did not believe in myself. When I pushed the door open, the room fell silent. 8 faces turned toward me, some curious, some dismissive, some openly annoyed. Warren Devereaux, the board chair, sat at the head of the table with the kind of posture that told everyone he enjoyed the power he held. Beside him were partners who had built their careers under Thaddeus, but none of them looked at me the way they used to look at him. To them, I was not a leader. I was an unwelcome complication. I introduced myself, but Warren leaned back and smirked. "We know who you are. What we do not know is why a man with no recent work, no leadership experience, and a documented history of financial instability thinks he belongs in that chair." He let the words sink in before adding, "You were homeless 2 weeks ago. How exactly do you plan to run a company like this?" His words hit with the precision of a knife. The room watched me as though waiting for me to crumble. Instead, I reached into my bag and placed all 26 sketchbooks onto the table. I opened them one by one, revealing pages filled with designs I had drawn in secret for the past decade. Buildings imagined in silence, spaces designed at night when I was trying to remember who I used to be. I told them I had never stopped learning, never stopped studying, never stopped creating. I only stopped being seen. Celeste Brinton, one of the senior partners, reached for a sketchbook and flipped through it slowly. She narrowed her eyes, tracing the lines with her finger. "These look like Thaddeus influence," she murmured. Then louder, "This is real talent. Not buried, not lost, just ignored." The room shifted. People who had been ready to dismiss me began to look differently. Warren did not like it. He stood and called for a vote to have a court review. Thaddeus will, claiming he must have been mentally compromised, to name me successor. The tension in that moment felt like a wire stretched to its breaking point. Before the vote could begin, the boardroom doors opened, and Silas Crowley walked in. He carried a file in an air of confidence I did not understand until he spoke. He laid documents on the table, drafts of transition plans written by Thaddeus himself, dated 3 years earlier, naming me as his intended successor. Plans Thaddeus never shared because I had cut him off. Plans Warren had clearly known nothing about. The board fell silent. Warren clenched his jaw, but he could not argue with Thaddeus' handwriting nor the timeline proving this was not a spontaneous decision. I felt the room tilt back toward me, not with enthusiasm, but with reluctant acknowledgement. The meeting eventually adjourned, but as I left the room I knew the hostility had not ended. Warren would not stop until he pushed me out. And as I walked down the hallway lined with architectural awards bearing Thaddeus' name, I whispered to myself, "No one here wants me to succeed, so I will have to stand on my own." The Montera Innovation Complex was supposed to be the project that steadied the foundation of Rowan Atelier. Again, a $142 million contract that could lift the company out of the quiet financial slide Thaddeus had been fighting in the years before he died. The board assigned me as the lead designer because it had been his final request. And for the first time since stepping into this world again, I felt something stir inside me that resembled purpose. I wanted to prove myself worthy of the trust Thaddeus left behind both in his will and in the studio he built for me. I poured everything I had into the design, working long nights on the 6th floor, translating ideas that had lived in my sketchbooks into digital form. For a moment, it felt like I was becoming the version of myself he always believed I could be. 3 days before the pitch, I opened my laptop and the entire project was gone. Every file, every rendering, every backup, the screen flashed error notifications that made no sense unless someone had tampered with it. I tried every method I knew to recover my work, but nothing came back. Hours of design, weeks of planning, months of pressure collapsed into a single hollow moment. The sinking dread spiraled deeper when I ran to the studio to check the physical model, only to find it smashed to pieces. The fragments scattered across the floor like someone had taken pleasure in destroying it. The lock on the door had been replaced, a brand new mechanism that did not match anything else in the house. It felt like I was being watched, like someone wanted me to know exactly how exposed I really was. When I called the IT department, they found that the security cameras on the 6th floor had been disabled for exactly 1 hour the night before. Long enough for someone to erase files, destroy the model, and vanish again. And although there was no proof tying it to anyone specific, I did not need evidence to know whose fingerprints were all over this. Still, suspicion was not enough to defend myself. When I brought everything to the boardroom, Warren did not even let me finish before cutting me down. "A competent leader protects his work," he said, leaning back with a smirk. "If you cannot secure your own project, how can you secure the future of this company?" Other board members exchanged glances, some sympathetic, some disappointed, and some impatient. It was clear Warren hoped the failure would be enough to discredit me entirely. I felt heat rising in my face, anger wrestling with shame until Silas stepped forward. He pulled me aside afterward, his voice low but steady. "Do not let him win," he said. "Thaddeus used to walk into pitches with nothing but a marker and a blank board. If you redraw the whole thing by hand, you will show them something no software can." The suggestion felt insane. Redrawing an entire complex of integrated structures from scratch with only 2 nights left. But desperation does strange things to the human mind. It can crush you or make you sharper. In my case, it forced me to sit down, sharpen a set of pencils, and push through exhaustion until the lines on the page started forming shape and meaning again. I did not sleep for nearly 48 hours. My hand blistered from gripping pens and markers. Blood from a torn callus stained the edge of one sheet, and I kept going anyway, because quitting would mean losing not just the project, but the legacy Thaddeus had built. By dawn of the pitch day, my body felt hollow, but the drawings in my hands felt alive. When I stepped into the pitch room, the representatives from the Montera Innovation Complex looked confused, expecting a digital presentation. Instead, I walked to the whiteboard and began to draw. The room quieted as the outline of the structure took shape as I explained airflow patterns, natural lighting angles, and sustainable material choices. Each stroke of the marker echoing with conviction I did not know I still had. I spoke from instinct rather than polish the way Thaddeus taught me to create when I was still young enough to believe in myself. At the end of the presentation, the lead investor walked straight to me and extended his hand. "This is the most compelling design philosophy I have seen in years," he said. "We would like to move forward immediately." The board was stunned. Even Warren struggled to hide his irritation as he congratulated me through clenched teeth. Later that afternoon, the IT department sent me a report showing that the deleted project files had been accessed by an account registered under Warren's credentials. It was not enough to take formal action, but it was enough to confirm what I already knew. I was not just fighting to rebuild a company. I was fighting the same man who had spent years undermining Thaddeus, the same man who now wanted to destroy me before I ever had a chance to stand on my own. After the Montera victory, the company seemed livelier on the surface, but underneath a strange tension lingered. I could feel eyes on me in hallways, hear whispers fade when I walked into a room. Some employees smiled politely, yet slipped mocking looks behind my back as though waiting for me to trip again. Anonymous emails arrived in my inbox every few days. "You will never be him," one said. "You do not deserve his chair," said another. I pretended they did not bother me, but late at night in the studio, the weight settled in my chest like an anchor. One afternoon, Odette approached me with a small worn notebook she found in Thaddeus' hidden safe. Inside were records of projects he had rejected quietly over the years. Each one included notes about irregularities, inflated budgets, or unethical partnerships. Every line pointed toward a pattern of internal corruption. And the person Thaddeus named most often was Warren. Reading those pages felt like falling into a truth I had sensed but never fully understood. Thaddeus had not just dealt with competition. He had dealt with betrayal from within. Then I turned a page and found entries about myself. Lines written in a shaky hand, likely during his later years. He thinks I stopped loving him, but I kept my distance because I feared losing him as I lost his parents. Another. If he ever returns, I want him to inherit everything I built. He is the only one who understands the soul of this place. I had spent a decade believing Thaddeus had given up on me when in reality he had been protecting me from the weight of expectations I was not ready for. The guilt of it settled deep. As if sensing a moment of vulnerability, another blow landed. A formal complaint was sent to the board claiming I had a history of psychological treatment and was unfit to lead. The allegation was not false, but it was deeply personal therapy. I attended during the worst years with Sienna, something I had never disclosed to anyone at work. Someone had dug into my past not to understand me, but to weaponize it. Warren called for a disciplinary meeting, waving a distorted report of my private life as if it were proof that I was unstable. Just when I felt the ground shifting beneath me again, Silas stepped in. He presented documents showing Warren had been receiving illegal kickbacks from a land developer the firm had recently partnered with. The revelation changed the temperature of the room instantly. Board members who had been leaning against me began turning their scrutiny toward Warren instead. His attempts to defend himself came out strained and irritated. Odette brought me another excerpt from Thaddeus' notebook the same evening. Trusting Warren was the biggest mistake I ever made, Thaddeus had written. It was not anger. It was disappointment. The kind of disappointment that reveals how much damage one person can do to something built with care. The next morning, when the board demanded Warren explain himself in a formal session, he did not show. He walked out of the building before the meeting began, leaving his office in disarray and every question unanswered. His disappearance only confirmed everything Thaddeus had recorded in the notebook. And as I stood in the boardroom that afternoon, looking at the chair he had vacated, I understood something vital. Warren was only one piece of a much larger problem. Whatever had been poisoning Rowan Atelier started long before I arrived, and it would not end with him running away. I was not just rebuilding a company. I was uncovering the shadows Thaddeus fought until the end. And for the first time since arriving in Hawthorne City, I felt the full weight of the responsibility he had trusted me with. I promised myself then, no matter how deep the darkness went, I would find the truth. For the company, for Thaddeus, and for the version of myself I was finally becoming. I spent the night before the meeting sitting alone in the 6th floor studio, staring out at Hawthorne City, glowing beneath the darkness. The Montera contract had saved us financially, but the atmosphere inside the company still felt unstable, as if something deep beneath the floorboards was shifting. The upcoming vote, the one that would determine whether Rowan Atelier would be sold to Gideon Langford Development for $315 million, was going to decide not only the company's fate, but mine. I could feel the weight of what was coming pressing against my ribs. When I walked into the boardroom the next afternoon, the tension was palpable. Half the board looked eager, calculating the personal profit they would make from the sale. The other half looked troubled, worried that selling to Gideon Langford meant erasing Thaddeus' name from the architectural world entirely. Gideon Langford sat beside them, sharp suit, colder eyes, the kind of businessman who treated everything as an asset, just another acquisition to turn a profit. Before anyone could begin, the IT department forwarded me a file discovered on Warren's old laptop. It was a confidential agreement between him and Gideon Langford promising him a percentage of the acquisition if he helped weaken the company enough to force a sale. Seeing those signatures felt like being punched in the chest. Everything, the sabotage, the anonymous emails, the attacks on my credibility, had been part of a plan designed long before I arrived. I put the documents on the table. The room shifted instantly. Some board members stared at the pages in shock. Others could not meet my eyes. I explained clearly and firmly what the evidence showed. Warren had been undermining the firm from the inside possibly for years, and his partnership with Gideon Langford was not speculation. It was written in black ink. Gideon Langford did not even blink. "Business is simple," he said calmly. "Those who are strong survive. Those who are not get replaced. If you cannot defend your company from the inside, then perhaps you are not the right person to lead." He was not trying to deny anything. He wanted to see how I would respond with fear, anger, or something else. Every word he used was meant to test the strength of my resolve. Before I could answer, Odette stepped into the room holding a sealed envelope. She explained that she had found it in Thaddeus' final safe, a letter he had instructed her to deliver only if the firm was ever on the brink of being sold. My hands shook as I unfolded it. Corbin Thaddeus had written, "If you stand at a crossroads where money on the table blinds those around you, remember. Rowan Atelier was never built to be sold. It was built to create, to teach, to uplift. Choose the path that honors that truth." For a moment it felt like he was standing behind me again, steadying my shoulders the way he used to when I doubted myself. I looked around the room, took a breath, and said I did not come back to sell the soul of this company. I came back to repay the man who believed in me when no one else did, including myself. Rowan Atelier is not for sale. The silence snapped. Some board members erupted with frustration, accusing me of ruining their chance at a payout. Others looked relieved, as if a weight had lifted off their conscience. The chaos escalated until Celeste rose from her seat asking for quiet. She pulled out an addendum to the will, something I had never seen. According to the document, if the heir rejected any acquisition offer from a development conglomerate, a $36 million reserve fund would be activated to stabilize the company and reinforce the heir's controlling power. Thaddeus had planned not only for my arrival, but for my resistance. The backlash from the board was immediate. 3 members announced they no longer wished to serve under my leadership and threatened resignation. I told them calmly that if they wanted out, I would approve their exit without hesitation. By sunset, all 3 submitted their resignations. When I returned to the hallway outside the boardroom, Celeste approached me with a nod. "Let them go," she said. "Rowan can only heal without them." As I walked back toward the elevator, I realized the company had reached a turning point. The dust had not settled yet, but for the first time the path ahead felt clear. The battle was far from over, yet I understood now that the only way forward was through every shadow still hiding inside what Thaddeus left me. The morning after the resignations, the office felt strangely peaceful. Tired, shaken, but peaceful. There was a sense of relief in the air, as if the company had finally exhaled after holding its breath for far too long. Losing 3 board members at once left a heavy void, but it also created space for rebuilding, for honesty, for a new culture that Thaddeus would have wanted. I gathered the entire company in the main hall and spoke as plainly as I could. I revealed everything: Warren's dealings with Gideon Langford, the sabotage, the hidden agreements, the years of deceit that had chipped away at the foundation of Rowan Atelier long before I walked through its doors. I did not present myself as the savior of anything. I simply said I wanted to fight for something larger than myself, and that I was willing to carry the responsibility Thaddeus entrusted to me, even if it terrified me some days. When the meeting ended, a veteran architect approached me quietly. He admitted he had once witnessed Warren trying to push Thaddeus out of authority years ago. Thaddeus had kept it quiet to protect the firm, and in some ways to protect me. Hearing this made my chest ache. I had blamed myself for abandoning him, but the truth was, he had been protecting me even when I was not there to know it. That night I sat in the studio again and read the final entry in Thaddeus' journal. If Corbin returns, the journey will be painful, lonely, and heavy. But it is the only path through which he will become the strongest version of himself. I finally understood. This inheritance was never meant to give me comfort. It was meant to give me clarity. In the weeks that followed, the Rowan Fellowship began drawing national attention. Juniper Moreno, was invited to speak at a major community design conference. Her Phoenix Library project was praised as one of the most innovative public access spaces of the year. Universities wrote letters thanking us for investing in young architects. Watching the fellowship grow felt like watching something heal in real-time, proof that Rowan Atelier still had life left in it. But the shadows were not completely gone. One afternoon, I received an anonymous email that read, "You ruined our plans. This is not over." It was a reminder that Warren had not acted alone, that the rot in the company ran deeper than one man. Still, I refused to let fear guide my decisions. I announced a restructuring plan that would clean out outdated systems, open more fellowship positions, and shift our focus toward community projects rather than corporate access. I offered Silas the role of senior design associate, recognizing that he had been the only one who supported me from the very beginning. A week later, Odette found one final key in Thaddeus' belongings. She led me to a small locked room near the east wing of the mansion. Inside was a nearly completed set of drawings for a children's museum designed for underserved neighborhoods, a project Thaddeus had started but never finished. He had left a single handwritten note attached to the final sheet. "Finish this for me." That night I stood on the rooftop of the mansion as the sun dipped behind the Hawthorne City skyline, the city glowing in colors that never looked the same twice. I thought about Silvercrest Bluffs, about the dumpster behind the abandoned mansion, about the version of me who believed he had nothing left. But I understood now I never lost myself. I just got buried in the wrong life for too long. The wind moved through the rooftop garden Thaddeus planted, and I whispered into the air, "I came home, Thaddeus." Then I lifted my head toward the horizon, ready to begin the next chapter, both for Rowan Atelier and for myself. When I look back at everything, the dumpster in Silvercrest Bluffs, the empty truck I once called home the nights I thought my life was already over, I realized none of it was wasted. Every scrape, every wrong turn, every betrayal forced me to face the parts of myself I had buried. And maybe that is the strange thing about rebuilding your life. You do not rise because the world suddenly becomes kind. You rise because you finally decide you deserve better than the version of yourself you left behind. If my journey says anything, it is that rock bottom is not an ending. It is the ground you push off from. Before you go, I would love to know you are here with me. Drop a listening in the comments or tell me where you are watching from tonight. Whether it is raining outside your window or you are hearing this on your way home, your presence means more than you think. And if stories like this resonate with you, consider subscribing. It helps this community grow one shared experience at a time. Thank you for being.